I got the sense that HBS is an incredible program, was much more structured, and I wouldn't necessarily have had the same flexibility or support to perhaps pursue my own startup, which is what I ended up spending much of the 2 years doing.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So while you were at school, you launched a startup and you pursued it while you were at school. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, I think COVID was tough on your startup a little bit, but maybe if you can share the process of starting a business in business school, the kind of support you got for your community. I think most people find this to be really interesting and worthwhile to know about.
Our business, I should say, was called Equipped, and we were building lockers that lent out sports equipment in parks and beaches and campgrounds. So if you've ever borrowed a bike or a scooter in major cities using an app, it was that same experience, but to instead borrow fun items where you'd like to use them. And it came from a very personal experience, a very personal pain point, if you will, when I lived in New York City and I couldn't use a basketball at a local court that I was playing at. And I spent, much of the 2 years trying to find a tech-enabled solution for this problem, being able to borrow items that you want where you want to use them. And that really came to life in a Stanford classroom, specifically a course called Lean Launchpad that is kind of a hands-on practicum for startup life. The great teaching team there really pushes the students to get outside the building. It's not a startup class where you're learning business models and frameworks, although there is some of that sprinkled on top. Instead, the emphasis is talking to customers and actually building something. So in the third week of that semester, together with my co-founder and our early employees, we were in a park lending out items. We had filled his trunk with soccer ball, football, basketball. We basically set up a lemonade stand and asked people if they wanted to borrow these things for a few bucks an hour. And that was kind of the crux of the class. And that was really what was special about Stanford is, it was horribly awkward to go to these parks and do that. Yet my classmates and the professors were encouraging me to do it. Were encouraging us to do it.
Right.
Supporting us. And it was with that kind of collective confidence that it made it that much easier to go out day after day, week after week, and kind of test these hypotheses that people would pay for items in parks. And ultimately they did. And that led to some institutional fundraising and building real lockers that lent out these items long after we were in parks lending them by hand.
What were some of the surprises that you had, things you might not have expected, the outsider who's reading the website or talking to a friend? What are the things that you can only pick up on at Stanford when you're on the ground at the GSB?
It's worth mentioning I was a reapplicant. I almost think back to kind of my first time applying to my second time. And I think in my first application, I copy and pasted things from the website or a couple of chats from ex-students and reference specific courses or professors. And I think that's all important. And yet the second time around, and certainly when I was on campus, it was that like deeper appreciation for what kind of runs in the water at Stanford. There's no silver bullet. There's no like specific thing. If I had to pinpoint it to one kind of pithy summary, I always come back to the cornerstone of the campus. If you're ever able to visit, I highly recommend it. It's extremely beautiful. And the cornerstone reads, dedicated to the ideas that will change the world and the people about to dream them up. And that big vision thinking and the focus on supporting specific people in their ambitions, in their dreams, I think is what makes the school so special. And you come out with this irrational confidence after being surrounded by 400 similarly wide-eyed classmates, and it leaves kind of a lasting mark on the students.
How did Stanford prepare you for your post-MBA career, and what were your post-MBA choices?
Coming out of Stanford, I really had a lot of conviction about kind of this early startup phase where founders are searching for product market fit and then ultimately scaling tech-driven or tech-enabled businesses. So I had the great fortune of helping scale a business within DoorDash called DashMart. And I've just returned to New York City to work on my next venture here, again, at the earliest stage of kind of tech-enabled startups, and more to come there.
The legend of Stanford grows through the Talk program. For those who don't know about it, maybe you can tell them what Talk is. I had the honor of reading your talk, and it was fantastic. It was one of the best. I was a professional speechwriter. It was one of the best pieces of public speaking I've ever read. It was fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about that and about the experience speaking so personally in front of your classmates.
Well, you're very kind, and a testament to, again, our partnership, our friendship, that you would take a quick peek at that before I bared my soul. Talk is a wonderful tradition at the GSB where once a week, a couple students get up in front of their peers, their classmates, and really talk about their story, their talk, if you will. And usually they follow some kind of biographical structure, although everyone puts their own spin on it. And I was lucky enough, it's a lottery-based system, and I was lucky enough to get a slot right at the end of the 2 years. Maybe coming back to good writing is good editing. It left a healthy amount of time to kind of think through what I wanted to say. And originally I was apprehensive about even doing it as, middle-class white male consultant. What more did I have to add to kind of our class's conversation? And I realized I did have something to say. And in comparison to some of my classmates who survived an Everest avalanche or overcame like tremendous adversity, a very, very different story. But ultimately landed on something that I'm super proud of. And the thesis of which was coming back to a Chris Rock joke that I cribbed, where he says, when you go on a first date with someone, you're not going on a date with them, but rather the best representative of who they are, people that wear your best clothes, tell your best stories. And it's not until you really get to know them that you get the real representative. And through that frame and with your help, talked about what my life has been like, both in the real terms and perhaps a slightly more vulnerable and candid story. And I think, again, a testament to the GSB and its community to be able to give a talk like that in front of all your classmates. And I feel great about it. I feel super supported. And yeah, it was certainly on a very short list of the highlights of my 2-year experience.
I mean, you should feel good about it. It was fantastic. So that is a sort of a theme of the GSB is kind of unleashing your personal vulnerability, the touchy-feely class, the talk. I mean, is that cliche? Is that overblown, or is that just the way it is? People are really, really learning to wear their hearts on their sleeves when they're there, or those who embrace it are willing to, I guess.
I don't know if it's overblown, underblown. It's an important part of the curriculum. There's certainly ample opportunity to exercise those, squishy interpersonal skills. The school does a nice job of making the programming flexible, and those opportunities are there for you if you want. And about 3/4 of the class, I think, does take touchy-feely, but a quarter doesn't. And similarly, a third to a half of people decide to give a talk, but half to 2/3 don't. So those things are there for you. Is it a part of the culture, a part of what's in the water? To my previous point, sure, but I don't think it's really thrust on anyone. And there's, a healthy number of skeptics or folks who didn't get as much out of it or didn't even, lean into those parts of the experiences like I did.